Hi, I'm Fraser Christian from the Coastal Survival School. I just want to do a video for you today as an introductory really, a sort of basic entry level way to confidently engage with the subject of coastal foraging. So we're down the beach today in West Dorset in late summer, early autumn. It's the first signs of autumn really today. I've just felt it the last couple of nights. You felt like lighting the wood burner, and that's the time to get out really and look at the plants as they're starting to change over in the seasons. The seasons happen a lot earlier down in the wild and on the coast than you may presume. So when you're going out looking for parsnips, you're not going to find the wild parsnip ready to cultivate and use as food in late autumn like we do inland. They're going to be ready in early spring, and that's to do with the temperature difference really. All wild vegetables that are kind of native or indigenous to this part of the world, so I'm not talking about tomatoes and potatoes, but things like your onions, your cabbages, your spinach, your kales, your carrots and your parsnips, they all come from the coast, and I'm going to show you all of those today in the stage we're at today, which is in the sort of seed stage, okay, in the fruiting stage, when they're ready to reproduce for next year. What happened was we moved in from the coast. We started off as coastal people. It's the best, most abundant zone anywhere, and really only lived inland once we burnt the forest down, burnt the woodland down, and took the seeds inland with us and started to grow them. And every mile that we move in from the coast, it starts to get a little bit colder and later, because the sea is obviously like a massive radiator that holds the warmth of the sun. So in autumn, we're not going to be finding the same vegetables in our garden as we do on the coast. It's going to be about the fruits and the seeds really, and the flowers. And the first one I want to take you to is something that's quite familiar to a lot of you. It's closely related in the same sort of family, or very similar, and this is a dewberry. It's very similar to the bramble. Again, there's loads of different types of brambles. They freely what's called hybridise or interbreed, so the list constantly changes, so it's not something you could ever kind of finish learning about really. What happens with the different fruits, you get different amounts of berrylets on them, okay? But it's very similar to the bramble, but it's often found in coastal exposed areas, and it goes very low to the ground. And I'm just guessing, because I don't know, I'm not a botanist, I'm a forager, I'm a chef. I talk about wild plants and wild resources for food, and I'm not so knowledgeable in the botany of it, okay, but I'm guessing because it's called dewberry, where it's out here and exposed, it gets its moisture possibly from the dew. I don't know, someone might be able to tell me, but lovely little fruits on them. And again, it's at that stage now where it's ready to put down its seed soon to start growing again in very early spring, when it's going to have plenty of water around. So here's the dewberry. You can identify it by these little tiny prickles on there, really similar to your bramble, okay, and it's got this little sort of natural bloom on it at the moment, okay, and this, if I rub that, you'll see that it comes off, and that's a natural sort of yeast, a kind of acidophilus in effect, that goes on the outside of the berries. And if you want to make wine with them, you want to collect them when it hasn't rained for a week or two, like at the moment. It's got all this bloom over it, and that's the same with grapes and plums, and exactly the same as when they make wine from grapes. This is what they're looking, this is the natural yeast on the outside of them, which again are really beneficial for the digestive system. Great to collect, make into jams, wines, sauces, make your own kind of cordials, your own sort of ribena for want of a better word, but always try and eat some of it when it's fresh. Fresh is always best. So that's the first plant we're going to look at, and now I'm going to take you through and hopefully show you some really familiar vegetables that you're used to finding in the greengrocers or the supermarket, and show you that they came from the beach. So the next plant I want to show you is possibly one of, I don't know if it's the most famous or one of the most useful definitely, and one of the most probably documented and oldest vegetables that we know about as coastal migrators especially. And this plant here is the sea kale, and again at the moment it's very late on in the season now, so it's done most of its stuff. These are really big tough leaves. So the part of the plant I want to focus on, and what you're really after, is the new growth right in the middle, as I said, and it's this lovely purple colour before it goes green. And it's the stem here, as you can see, it's packed full of sugars and electrolytes and salts and full of juice. So it's a great plant to come and get on a hot day if you can find it. And when it's this young, simply just chew the stems, and immediately you can start to feel all of the goodness coming out. Okay, and that's because our bodies are we're still coastal hunter-gatherers basically. We haven't evolved that much. It's only been a blip in our evolution since we lived on this food, and my body straight away is accepting that food and almost saying to me, you've brought me back to a good food source. It's telling me I'm feeling refreshed, rehydrated. It's kind of hard to explain. You need to get out and really come and experience this food. As I said, we started off as coastal people, and this is the food we really need to be focusing on. This has been cultivated in the 1940s. I used to see it appearing on menus and people grew this in their garden. But why this plant is so special is when we go into winter and there's nothing left on the beach anymore, there's no greenery whatsoever and no apparent food. It's the root that's under the ground on this plant that offers us quite a unique food source in the wild of a really big calorific food stock. That's something with lots of carbohydrate in, something that we can break the carbohydrate down into sugars and gain loads of energy from. Our bodies can only store carbohydrate or as sugars as energy, so this food is reputed to be one of the, or this plant, sorry, is reputed to be one of the first foods that allowed early coastal migrators to navigate the coast, and that would be the root section on it. And if I can find somewhere it's slightly more exposed, I'll try and get a bit of the root out. We're on a private beach, okay, and the general rule or laws containing foraging, if you just want to know briefly, it goes down to a trespass, okay, which is a civil offence, unless we cause damage, okay. So theoretically, if we damage this plant, we dig the roots up and stop it to not grow next year, we've killed this plant, okay. So roots are a bit of a grey area, and you do need permission generally to dig up roots and remove the whole plant. I generally say for sustainability and to make sure we don't go out and kind of pillage the countryside, if you come across 3 flowers, only take 1, always leave 2. If you come across 2 flowers, you don't take them. If we follow that rule, there'll always be enough food left, because we need this to be sustainable. This is what our ancestors lived off, so don't just come down, pick the whole lot. There'll be nothing left for anybody else or yourself next year. So this plant here should be very familiar to you. Okay, and this is basically the original wild version of spinach. It's called sea beet. It's also where beetroot comes from. Beetroot would have been bred by finding the seeds that had gone red on this plant and the leaves that were red, and eventually they bred them and got beetroot from it. But this is wild spinach. Most of it at the moment, because we're just at the end of summer, it's gone into seed, and most of its energy has gone into the seed. And I generally say that it's the energy of the plant that we're after capturing. So look at what, or where the plant's putting its energy. Is its flowers, it's the new in spring, it's the new green growth. Survival is an energy in, energy out situation, okay? But there's no seasons for this, okay? So you can throw away all your books as far as it says go and collect spinach in March. It's at its best. Nature doesn't read the books, okay? Nature does what it wants. And at the moment it's been sunny, it's been dry, and then it's rained, and then it's been sunny, it's been dry. And that may change next year. We all know we have dry summers, wet summers, cold winters, warm winters, etc. So although it's put all its energy into making these seeds at the moment, it's got plenty of new growth as well. Okay, so it's constantly trying to regrow and fruit and basically breed, okay, and carry on and evolve. So we're going to look for the newest growth, and it's the little tiny lime green leaves, and they're all about the size of a teaspoon, I suppose, no bigger than a teaspoon. Once they get bigger than that, you're going to have to cook them down for a lot longer. And if you're in a survival situation, that's fine. But as far as foraging and getting the best food, we want to look for these young, lovely leaves. And just treat all of the wild vegetables as you would your conventional vegetables. So whatever you do with spinach, I'm not going to say this is the best way to cook this. Okay, you can just toss it into a salad with a bit of vinaigrette. If you like making ravioli with it, if you want to make a risotto with it, if you just want to have it steamed, do whatever you want with it. Treat it as you would your conventional vegetables. So sea beet, wild spinach, quite easy to identify, lovely little tiny waxy leaves, okay, and this waxy stuff you'll find, or this kind of coating, is kind of generic to a lot of coastal vegetables, and it's the kind of coating that keeps the salt off of it, or the salt that's built up on it as well. It gives it a lovely little kind of protective layer. So look for the new young growth on it, and as I say, treat it just as you would any other vegetable, okay? So keeping with the familiar vegetable theme, I'm not going to go right into lots of plants that we can find out here that you're not going to be familiar with in your greengrocer or supermarket. It's a good way to start rather than trying to learn the whole subject. Start with things that you're familiar with, and we focus on just the vegetables today. So this plant here, okay, just growing out of this bit of shingle bank here, and loves growing lovely loose shingle and sand, is the wild parsnip. Okay, and if any of you are gardeners, you'll probably recognise the leaf of the parsnip. So again, like I said earlier, nature doesn't follow the rules, okay, it's all dependent on what the weather's done. So this plant, I'm going to show you in a second, is in seed nearly everywhere at the moment. But it's also dropped some of its seed earlier and started to have some new growth, okay? And that's just to do with the weather. And the wild parsnip part of this plant is obviously underneath the ground, okay, and it's in this shingle here. And like I say, you will need permission to dig up the roots of vegetables, okay? So I'm not going to dig this one up, but if you can find the leaf of this, and we'll do a close-up on this in a minute, okay? It's got little tiny small hairs on it, and the smell is actually really significant on this one. Now this is one of the Umbellifer family, which is in the same family as hemlock, which is deadly poisonous, okay? And unlike some of the other Umbellifers, it can cause a slight reaction on the skin, okay, which is the sap in it to do with the sunlight, and can burn. So you need to be really careful when you engage with wild plants. And if you're going out as a beginner or as a novice to not just the subject but to a new plant, just because I say I eat this plant and I like this plant, don't go out, pick it, get it all over your skin and eat loads of it until your body's got used to it, or you know that you can eat this plant. Just remember, peanuts kill some people. Food is not a generic thing, it's a personal subject, okay? So first of all, a really good way, a really basic way to get into these plants is to crush them up, okay? Once we know that it's the edible plant, okay? We're never going to touch anything we're unsure about. Crush up the plant and have a smell, and straight away my instinct is gaining some information from that plant. Smell is what we taste with smell, okay? It's the same sort of receptors in the top of the mouth and the nose that allow us to taste, is also through the smell of it as well. So smell it. If straight away you cough, you splutter, it makes you feel sick, or it smells acrid to you, it's probably not a plant you're going to want to eat. I don't know many people who don't actually like the parsnip, but definitely some people whose skin has reacted to touching them, okay? So come out and engage with the plants, but just remember it's a personal thing. So the wild parsnip, end of summer, should really just be in seed, but like I've said, nature doesn't read the books, so always keep your eyes open whatever time of year it is for new growth. Now I'm going to show you the seed of this plant, which is pretty much how you're going to find it at the end of summer and in early autumn. And the seeds are often a really good way to be able to find the plant. They stick the seed heads normally right up out of the ground, okay, and it was the seed heads of this plant that led me over to find the new growth, because this is just down in the undergrowth, in all the other green, it's quite hard to spot. But now we're going to move over to the seed head and you'll see how easy that is to see. So this is the wild parsnip, okay, very small groove and very soft hairs on the stem, okay. Back of the leaf is a lot duller, okay, but again, how I remember this is definitely by the smell, and you want to just get in and crush that plant up, okay. So here's the seed head of the parsnip. It's in the Umbellifer family, like I said, which is the same family as the hemlock, and the Umbellifer is basically the same word, or umbrella comes from Umbellifer, which came first, the umbrella or the Umbellifer, I don't know, but there you can see the shape of it. So you do need to be really careful with this family. I'd say go out and learn what hemlock is first of all. If you're unsure about this family, get that one squared away before you start moving on to the rest of them. They're massively different to the trained eye, but when you first start off you don't want to make mistakes, it can kill you. So here's the seed head, massive tall seed head sticking right at the ground, and again I spotted this from a long way away, and that's what led me down to the new growth that was surrounding it. These are going to fall off within the next couple of weeks and distribute over the ground. And like I said earlier, when you're coming to find some plants, think of sustainability, look for the future as well, look for these plants being available to everyone, okay? So come when you find a nice, what we call a community, and here there's loads, there's another big version behind it there, and in this undergrowth there's loads of new growth. This is somewhere that's a good place to come and collect these parsnips from. And like I say, if you came in, you only found 3 plants with seeds on, and you only found 3 plants on the ground, you'd only take 1. These seeds can be used as spices, and all of our spices are generally from seeds, okay? So they can be used in spices. They're not one of the ones that have an amazing flavour, unlike its relative, the hogweed seed, which has a beautiful kind of almost aromatic cardamom would be the sort of flavour it's close to. These ones don't have that much smell. They have a sort of vague perfume to them. So this is the wild parsnip seeds, and they're just like your normal parsnip seeds that any gardener is going to be familiar with. And this stem on the parsnip has got these really defined deep grooves. That's something that you won't find on your hemlock, but like I say, you wouldn't come out picking any Umbellifera until you definitely know the difference between hemlock and all of the other Umbelliferas. But the seeds I really want to talk about for flavour are on the next plant I want to show you now, and it's just right in front of me here, okay? And this is the wild carrot. So we'll talk about the wild carrot now, and again, I've spotted it by its seed heads. It's an Umbellifera again, but it's really unusual that when it starts to fruit or seed up, it starts to close up, unlike the other Umbelliferas which open up. And it's these beautiful little seeds in here on the wild carrot, and they're these tiny little, really hairy seeds. And we'll do a close-up on these in a minute. And they have an amazing, really punchy, citrus kind of fennelly flavour to them. They're an amazing wild medicine. The constituents inside of these carrot seeds are so far-reaching for conditions they can cure or aid that they really are. It is really fascinating, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do another video just on the wild medicine, because it's a whole subject again. So stay tuned, and we're going to progress through with lots of different uses from these plants, from how to make cordage and lots of different bushcraft techniques that we can use from these wild plants, not just as food. And our ancestors would have used all the parts of these plants. But really, when we're talking spices, I think these are one of my favourite. The wild carrot seed is definitely a really good kind of, it's almost got a very cleansing, and antiseptic's the wrong word, but it's a very cleansing, refreshing, restorative kind of tonic flavour. Okay, really good. One recipe I do with these is a lovely fillet of fresh sea bass caught from the same beach down here, filleted open. These lovely young seeds, when they're just at this green stage, over the fillet of bass, folded in half and just baked in the fire in tin foil, baked in clay, or literally steamed in the pan. These are really good. The carrot is under the ground, and again, we're not going to look for the root of this plant now, because the energy's gone. The energy's gone into the seeds of this, in the same way that we wouldn't dig this parsnip up for the root of it. Once the energy's gone into the seed and the flower, it's gone from the root, and it would have gone too tough. So the first parsnip we looked at, the new fresh growth, is when we're going to dig it up for the root. Okay, this one, if I pull this one out of the ground, it'd be like a really hard. And the wild carrot underneath the ground is white, not orange. That was made for William of Orange as a present, so don't be fooled when you pull them up. But again, smell is another great way of identifying these plants by the seeds, and you can really, once you've got that fixed, smell is directly transferable. It's an emotion, it creates an emotion, and most of your memories, as you know, you can remember what your school smelt like probably rather than what it looked like the first time you walked into your granny's house. You can remember the smell of your grand's house. It goes deep in. Okay, so always smell. If you can't get any smell from a plant, that's when we need to start looking at it in more of a sort of botanical way and breaking down the shapes of it. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick look. I don't think I'm going to be lucky enough to find any carrots this time of year like I have with the parsnips, but hopefully if there was any carrots growing here last year, there may be some new growth. So we'll just have a slight rummage around in the undergrowth here and see if we can find some. But the time I come looking for the carrots is generally in very early autumn, very early spring, sorry, and there's no evidence of any fresh growth around here. If we do bump into any on our travels, because we're going to go and look for a few more plants now, we'll come in on them. But like I say, I'm digging the carrots up in my garden now because I've cultivated them and moved inland with them, but in the wild these are going to be ready in very early spring. So these are the wild carrot seeds, and you can see they're in 2 different stages of development. This is how they go when they're just about to fall off, and you can see these are just ready to fall off now, and they'll be going down into the ground, into the shingle, and growing for next year. They are okay for a spice when they're like that, but I prefer them when they're just a little bit greener. And you can see, so there's no season. This one's about 2 weeks behind that, or a week behind that, so nature's making up its own rules. And like I say, books are good for basic identification, but don't follow anybody that says a plant always does this at this time of year. Just always get out and have a look. It's all to do with local weather conditions. So we've just been looking at vegetables that are really familiar to you, and I think that's a really good way to start. Slightly more unusual plant here, one you're not going to find in your greengrocers or your supermarket, and this is rock samphire, not to be confused with the uber popular Mars samphire that I've actually seen full sale now in the supermarkets, which coincidentally comes, it's not even a wild one, it's all grown in Israel. This is one that grows out on the rocks, or here it's grown on a really sort of dry little shelf on the end of the shingle. And again, it's put all of its energy at the moment up into its seeds, so we'd have to kind of really look round into it and get right into it to try and find any young, fresh, green, vibrant growth at all. And it'd be these kind of ends here we'd be looking for. And because I've picked that from the middle of the plant, it's not that green, it's nice and pale yellow. I don't actually like this one raw, and a lot of the foods we wouldn't have just eaten them raw, we would have processed them and kept them for winter. And this is one that pickles really well, just into hot vinegar. So I generally fill up a jar with the little broken down leaves and then just pour red hot vinegar onto it, and it works really well. Again, it's got a kind of a citrusy flavour, a little bit like the wild carrot seed, so it's going to go really well with fish. And these plants are no foods and no spices are available or to us because of how they taste. They all have medicinal, digestive, say, benefits, antiseptic properties. They stop the food, it stops it going off if we're curing it or preserving it. The energy of the food has got to be really good as well. It's not just because it's trendy and it's well that chefs talk about it. And samphire is really popular, and we talk about it as a food because it's got omega-2 and omega-3 oils in, and lots of other far-ranging nutrients in. So don't just think about coming down and eating these plants raw, and don't, for your first experience of wild food, just pop a leaf into your mouth and chew it and go, ooh, it tastes a little bit bitter. I had a chef make a really daft comment once after a course, and he said half the food we ate tasted nice and the other half tasted horrible. And I said to him, you didn't bring with you any salt and pepper, any salad dressing, we haven't steamed it, tossed it in a little bit of butter. So don't dismiss these plants just by their raw chew, okay? Think about pickling them and cooking them in other ways like you would your vegetables. You just don't eat raw vegetables all the time, do you? So rock samphire, slightly more unusual, a little bit harder to find than a lot of the other common vegetables, and hopefully in a later video we'll go into more specialist, well not specialist, but more unusual, out of the way kind of foods that we can find on the beach. So this plant here may not be familiar to you in the greengrocers, although I said we were going to try and focus on vegetables that were familiar to you. I don't know if many people can identify this from the leaf because you're not used to seeing the leaf of this plant. But this is horseradish, wild horseradish, and I don't just use the roots on it, and you're probably all familiar with horseradish, and you'll find it with your roast beef and other such fatty meats. And again, it's because of its digestive properties that we have it. We don't have it because it tastes nice with beef. We have it because it helps us digest the animal fats, okay? And the bit that we really want on this to make the sauce with is the root underneath the ground, and it's really difficult to dig out. Not really difficult, it involves quite a lot of energy to dig it out, and I won't be digging the root out of this until the energy from the leaf has gone back into the root. It's unlike the carrot, whereas once it's spent its energy, the root of the carrot is no good. This one, it will actually, it's a perennial, it'll actually go in and shrink back into the root, and that's when I'll come and get the root of it. The leaves I use though for wrapping around and binding fish and making small parcels to go into the embers or to go into the steamer. It works really well for that. Really young leaves, this has gone on again, we're at the end of the summer. Really young small leaves can be shredded up and steamed and go into food. Okay, but what I'm going to do with this is remember its location, and I may even put a ring of stones around it or some sticks in the ground, and then in the winter I can come back and find out where this root is, and that's one way that we can remember where the roots are to harvest them. It'll be the same way as when we talked about the sea kale. The early hunter-gatherers would put rings of stones around the green of the sea kale, so in winter when they come back and all this is vanished, we know where that really good energy is underneath the ground. It's a very good plant to have in winter because of that real fiery kind of heat that's in the horseradish. That's going to warm our systems up and it'll help our sluggish bodies in winter Really good for flus and cold cures as well. It's got that real kind of volatile, mustardy type oil that creates lots of heat in the body, so really good plant. So when you think about your wild plants, don't just think about the leaves, don't just think about the flowers, don't just think about the roots. Try and get out in all times of the year when you're going to hopefully experience them in their many different sort of incarnations. So I hope you've enjoyed that video on introductory kind of way of getting into coastal foraging for plants. Like I said, it's not an in-depth video, it's just an enticer really, something to see if you're interested in the subject to get you out. And if you are interested in any of the foraging, fishing, bushcraft, survival, please look up my website www.coastalsurvival.com. The links are on the video. Keep tuned to TAOutdoors. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff in the future, covering the gathering, the cooking, the catching, the hunting and the processing of food especially. We know you're really into food, and like a lot of you that watch YouTube, you may use a fire still, you'll have a go at making a bow, but you'll definitely probably want to kind of come out and come on a course to learn about the food. It's not an academic subject, it's something that was taught traditionally in the apprenticeship scheme where you need to be shown firsthand really. But if you're unsure and you go out on your own, please, please, please remember, never eat anything or touch anything that may be poisonous. If you're not 110% sure, leave it alone, and definitely don't try and be clever and say you know what you're talking about and recommend to someone else eat it. Just keep away from it, stay safe, stay tuned. I'll see you in a bit. Cheers.